So Andrew, you have a bunch of stuff going on. I don't even know if you guys know this. Andrew is the director of the Jinx, and he informs that moments ago the Jinx won a Peabody Award just today, so that's very exciting. Tell us a little bit about the Jinx and where it came from, and sort of, it's a very new kind of storytelling. So tell us a little bit about it.
Well, the Jinx started because I had made a narrative film with Ryan Gosling and Kirsten Dunst and Frank Langella about Robert Durst, who I've always found to be a fascinating character because he's this enormously wealthy guy who was accused of 3 murders over 30 years. And that's not normally the kind of guy who gets accused of 3 murders over 30 years. And so I was fascinated by his story. His wife disappeared in 1992. A lot of people believed that he had killed his wife. And then 18 years later, they reopened the case of the missing wife, and they tried to talk to a key witness who they had never gotten a chance to speak to. She's found murdered. So 18 years later, a new murder happens, and then 7 months later, a body washes up in Galveston, Texas, the dismembered corpse of a drifter named Morris Black. Again, that's tied back to Robert Durst. So he was an extremely unusual suspect and a person who had not had all that much scrutiny given how many things he had been accused of having done. So I took an interest in that story. I made a narrative feature about it, and then right before that movie came out in theaters, he just called me out of the blue and said, I'd like to see the movie, and I've heard good things about it, and would you be willing to show it to me, which I was happy to do.
And that led you to actually making the Jinx.
Yeah, so then we started making the Jinx because we knew that he was prepared to sit for an interview, so that became sort of the centerpiece of this other piece of television that we did, which started out, I think we started out thinking we were making a feature film, and then, or at least a documentary film. And then over time, we realized there was so much material and there was so much to be had and so much that people were interested in about the story that we thought we would allow the story to take place over a longer period of time. So it ended up being 6 episodes on
Let's
HBO.
talk about that a little bit. It's an old phenomenon and it's a new phenomenon. And I think we're seeing it right now a lot with crime stories. There's an easy comparison to, say, Making a Murderer, which took a story that maybe would have in the past been a long documentary and pulled it out well over time. Do you see that sort of moment happening on television where you can pull a story out into multiple pieces?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, there's almost a backlash. I was just reading in the trades today or something, there was a story about how television could be done in a much shorter period of time. I think people were complaining about the number of episodes. So I think the pendulum is already, now that we're here noticing it in this cutting edge conference, it's in the process of swinging back. So people are saying, how come we can't, get this story in 30 minutes instead of having to watch it over multiple hours? But our story, I think, worked well in that context. We didn't stretch it out because we needed it to be longer. We stretched it out because the story required it. That's a good motivation rather than, sometimes you see television networks will stretch something out because they want to sell more ads or they want to make something take place over time. This was more natural, I think.
Plus, I think particularly with the sort of crime-focused television, there's so much extra real information that you build this natural community of sort of amateur detectives around it. Did you see that with the Jinx?
Yeah, I mean, we saw, especially in social media, like very early on, there was a big, that's Bob Durst making that noise, by the way. We started, there was a subreddit that popped up very quickly, and suddenly, there were thousands of people commenting on it, and there were people making, baking cakes that had the evidence from the film, and somebody needs it. So anyway, so there was a tremendous amount of interest in social media, and that became one of the key things that drove it. And I think you're seeing that more in true crime generally, that people are starting to sort of take these things home with them and want to do their own sleuthing work and want to Google things. And so now people will come up to me in the street and say, I read this about Bob Durst, is that true? And it's really clear that they're going way beyond what's just in the 4 corners of the show that they've seen.
Right, and there's a connection to New Orleans here, right? He was arrested here. He's actually in jail here, right?
Yeah, so Bob Durst, I just learned how he was arrested, which is that he was. We were on episode 5 of the Jinx, which is 6 episodes long, and episode 5 already revealed a bunch of evidence that was pretty negative to him, and so and I know that the police had been contemplating arresting him for a long time because the police knew in advance what we had put into the show. So we had discovered this evidence, which we shared with the police quite early on. And so he was in New Orleans. He was staying at the Marriott. Is anybody else staying at the Marriott? Perfect.
Watch out.
So what room? So he was staying at the Marriott, and the police, I guess the FBI had found out that he had spoken to a friend of his and said, I'm staying in a hotel in New Orleans under a false name, and I'm going to watch episode 6 of the Jinx, and I'm going to see how bad it is, and depending on how bad it is, I'm going to decide whether or not I'm going to go to Cuba. And he had already scouted going to Cuba before, and he had told me that he went to Cuba just to go have a vacation, but I had a sense that he was going to go and see whether there was a place there that would be comfortable for him if he needed to get out of the United States. So the FBI finds out about it, and they send a couple guys to look at the hotels in New Orleans, and they visit 10 hotels in New Orleans, and they finally get to the Marriott, and they're talking to the desk clerk, and they say what they usually say, which is, do you have anyone here registered under Dorothy Signer, which is one of Bob Durst's names, or Diane Wynn, or Emilio Vignoni. He had lots and lots of aliases, and essentially they said, we don't have anybody by that name. And then just as the FBI guys were getting ready to leave, in walks Bob Durst from the street, and they're sort of standing in the lobby, and they say, Mr. Durst, and he doesn't respond, thinking maybe that he was going to get out of that situation. And a woman is sitting in the lobby, and she walks over and ignores the FBI guys and says, oh, Mr. Durst, I'm a big fan, and I hope you don't mind, maybe signing this piece of paper for me. So it's a very weird moment when like real life and television are mixing and people are confused. So it was then kind of awkward. So he invited the FBI guys up to his hotel room, where they immediately handcuffed him to the table, and he said, oh, by the way, I don't want any more trouble, so just to let you know that my jacket is over there, and I've got a loaded gun in the pocket of my jacket, and I've got this big bag of weed over there in the corner. So
it's still at the Marriott.
Yeah, so he had,
Find
again, 324, I'm sure this gentleman knows already. That's where you can get Bob Durst's weed, which is, I have to tell you, of the highest quality. This is a man who does not skimp on the quality of his substances.
Yeah. So this is kind of exciting. Andrew was telling me backstage, not all of the material made it into the Jinx.
That's true.
And we actually have a little bit that wasn't seen. Can you talk about it a little, and then we can roll it?
Yeah. So this is just a few minutes of material that came out of my meetings with Bob, which didn't quite make it into the series, but is interesting and gives you a little bit of a sense of his personality and what was going on when he was hiding out in Galveston, Texas, dressed as a woman.
So you're a filmmaker. That's obviously very high-end filmmaking was being done. But you have an app called KnowMe, which is all about democratizing filmmaking and making it easier for people. Talk about that a little bit.
So when I was making the Jinx, I having had some tech background before, I was paying a lot of attention to the fact that people wanted to tell their stories using a mobile device, but there were not a lot of options. You could tell a story using something like Snapchat, which obviously is very effective, but very limited in terms of the storytelling. There's no editorial function. So you can do it very quickly, but you can't do all that much. Or on the other end of the spectrum, you had something like iMovie, which is a very rich editing system, but you sort of need to be like a professional filmmaker, or you need to think like that in order to use it. So it just seemed to me that there ought to be a way to allow people to tell stories using their mobile device without having to learn to be an editor, and that might open up the ability for people to speak in the language of video, which obviously is a popular way of communicating.
Right. So I think the idea of democratizing video creation is really powerful. You see every big media brand rushing towards video. You see, literally the amount of video that's being consumed online every day goes up and up and up. Is there something special about creating video on the same device that you consume it on? Does that change your relationship with the medium at all? Or is it really just about, it's a camera, we might as well use it like a different kind of camera?
Well, I mean, for us, I think the key is time compression. You know, that one of the things that you get to do on a mobile device is you get to see time compressed video, you get to see high quality pieces of material that are put together and crunched to eliminate the boring parts. Similarly, you can make video in the same way. You can make video, at least using KnowMe, the idea was to make video in such a way that you can actually edit and eliminate the parts that you don't need to see, so you can tell a more complex, rich story.
Yeah, and I think we actually have a little clip of KnowMe
there's a little
in action, so if we could run that now, that'd be great.
Craig, would you run the little clip?
Hi, I'm Neve, and I'm excited to get you started with KnowMe. Let me show you how easy it is. All you have to do is touch the viewfinder in the middle and start talking. Just like this. Hey guys, it's Neve. Guess what I did this weekend? Once you let go, that clip is added to your message. You can also talk over any picture or video already on your phone. Just pick one, hold it down, and talk over it. Like this. I went to a wedding with some friends, and I totally got my groove on. And then everybody ended up jumping in the pool. To preview your message, tap the play button. Check it out. Hey guys, it's Neve. Guess what I did this weekend? I went to a wedding with some friends, and I totally got my groove on. And then everybody ended up jumping in the pool. It's that quick. That's how you know me.
So that seems like a very simple way to make pretty well edited video. But obviously the big question with video everywhere is distribution. I couldn't help but notice those videos are kind of square. It seems like Instagram size. Do you have a target for where people are going to distribute KnowMe videos? Is it YouTube? Is it Facebook?
Well, I think on the KnowMe platform, there's a place where you can sort of watch things, and people have been, KnowMe's been in the App Store for about a little over 2 months. And lots of people are making stuff, and they're watching each other's content, and you can follow people that are making interesting stuff. So you can make very casual things like, hey, I'm at the store, should I get this kind of peanut butter or this kind of peanut butter? So this very simple touch and talk capability lets you do casual things, but also you can make more complex stories. So people are watching those things, but also it's a porous platform, so you can, if you want to post to Facebook or Twitter, you can do that as well.
What do you think the future of these kinds of apps are? I mean, you've obviously got an app in the store. There is the Snapchat juggernaut. There are a bunch of other ways to sort of capture share. What do you think it's going to, is it just going to be a huge, rich ecosystem, or do you think people are going to be drawn to specific kind of experiences?
I guess my sense is that it's going to stop being quite as much about disappearing messages, and I think there'll be a little bit of a swing back toward content that has a little more depth to it. And that's why I think, for me, the editorial function is so important. You don't want to have to go through video and make layers and become a filmmaker, but if you can quickly compress time, you're really going to end up sharing stories in a much shorter period of time. But that requires a little bit more thought on the part of the user. So it may be that, sort of apps 2.0 is a step away from just faster, and maybe a step a little more toward better quality content. Still fast, but not quite as fast as the content that's really totally mindless, because people are, looking for a little more contour, a little more depth, a little more authenticity, the ability to express themselves a little more deeply, even using these little devices that have become like little film studios in the pocket of your hand.
Awesome. Well, that, unfortunately, is all of our time. This is Andrew Jarecki. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks.